Welcome back to OT Between the Sheets, a podcast designed to have uncomfortable conversations foster pleasurable outcomes. I'm your host, Nicole, an occupational therapist, pelvic health specialist, sexologist, educator, entrepreneur, author, kink enthusiast, cat lover, and all-around conversationalist. My partner and co-host, Jasmine and I, will be discussing various sexuality topics that the average person might not know about, fully understand, or feel comfortable enough to talk about with others. This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only, for an audience of consenting adults seeking ways to improve their sex life, unabashedly learn about others' sex lives, have a laugh, or some food for thought. These conversations are with, for, and about real people, regardless of race, sex, gender, orientation, relationship style, ability, body type, or intellect. Some discussions may be more explicit than others, as well as more uncomfortable than others. Listeners' discretion is advised. Take the best and leave the rest.
Hello, welcome back to OT Between the Sheets, episode 6. I'm your host, Jasmine.
And I'm Nicole.
And let's just jump right into it. We want to apologize for not putting out an episode last week, but your girls are busy. Nicole is in the middle of a dissertation, so that takes top precedence over any and every activity that we're doing, because we got to finish it. It's going to be Dr. Nicole.
Y'all, it's strumming my pain. It really is.
Strumming my pain.
Okay.
All right. So, yes, that is so important. So, yes, days where we have to really focus on times that we can record. But if it runs into our school days, that comes first. And if we don't get to it, we just don't get to it. And on top of that, Nicole teaches tap as well as dance. So this weekend was also her preparing for her amazing tap dance show. So yay, it was a
Thank
very
you. Snaps for me. Snaps for me. My feet hurt. My back hurts. My glutes hurt.
Everybody give Nicole a nice shots up. Yeah. I'm taking a shot for y'all right now. So
thank you.
Also, that was my first time actually seeing Nicole dance and tap. I saw the girls that she teach, but I've never actually seen her dance, so it was also really cool. And my friend went with me, and she was able to see a tap show for the first time. So,
shout out to Lindsay for coming to the tap show because she wanted to do something different with her Saturday night.
Yeah, shout out to Lindsay.
Absolutely.
So it was great for both of us to see the show, and the show is really, really good. So congratulations.
Uniting colleges through tap. We do a show every year. I expect to see more people next year.
Yes, me
too.
Thanks. So if y'all listen to this next year, y'all better be at the show with me, sitting next to me. Yeah, listen to our podcast. That's Nicole. So that was that this weekend. But now we are back. We're trying to get back into a pace. We got a lot of things happening this month. One being because it's my birthday month, and my birthday is actually tomorrow. So everyone say happy birthday to me tomorrow. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes. Happy birthday, babe.
Thank you. So we got some stuff coming up this weekend to celebrate, as well as another competition for the girls that Nicole teaches. Doing a brunch with my family and Nicole. So we're going to be busy. So we're hoping to still knock out another episode between now and then to record for next week. But
those of you who know us, listen, just give the grace, all right?
And give me a small window because it is my birthday.
Also, yes.
And I'm very much an Aries.
What does that have to do with anything?
My patience is not there.
It's not there.
So I need y'all to have patience for me. Thank you.
Very well.
Anyway, Nicole, what are we talking about today? What's our topic?
Okay, so last episode, when we were talking about, how we met.
That was so cute.
It was so cute. I had mentioned that I identify as ethically non-monogamous. And we have a couple friends who are constantly what does that even mean? What does polyamory mean? You might be seeing that in these terms either in mainstream social medias or online or in the TV shows that we watch. So if that's the case, this is what that episode is about. Just kind of going over like what these terms mean. I actually took a non-monogamy class in the summer of 2021 as part of my Master's of Education in sexuality education. And so I'm literally only talking about like takeaways that I got from this class. So if there's anything that is interesting to you, definitely like, comment, share, start those conversations. And hopefully some of this information kind of helps you with those, with having to start those conversations. Maybe it'll make you think of something or ask a question, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, see what happens.
So,
and then you can do your own research off of that, because I am by no means an expert in this. It was like a 4-day class. It was a long-ass class.
So we're going to go over some basic, we're going to scratch the surface. I would love to get a little deeper into this conversation later down the line. So maybe like a part 2 of what this means and different branches off of monogamous and non-monogamous. But
in which case we could potentially bring in a guest speaker.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
There's a lot of people who wants to guest host, and I want to, at least in the next month or 2 to have our first guest on the show and to talk about a topic with another person. So I think that would be really cool. But I know this was one topic that a lot of people had questions on and was like, what does this mean? And how does this mean? So hopefully this answers some questions. But if you still have questions, please send them our way.
Absolutely.
So what are some key takeaways what is like one of the top or main key takeaway that you learned or got from this experience in that class?
Okay. First and foremost, ethical non-monogamy is...
Wait, can we give a little back? What is non-monogamous?
I'm about to say that, babe.
Oh, my bad. Go ahead.
Let me
go ahead.
say what I'm going to say.
Do your thing.
Thank you so
Let me
much.
take a back seat. Go ahead. Do your thing.
There you go. Thank you. Let me drive. Okay? Thank you. Anyway, ethical non-monogamy is the like umbrella term for talking about different relationship styles where individuals are in multiple romantic, sexual, and or intimate connections with the consent and knowledge of all people involved. Okay. Whereas polyamory is basically like a subset of ethical non-monogamy. So ethical non-monogamy, or ENM as I'll refer to it from here on out, is the umbrella term. Polyamory is a subset of that umbrella term. And basically saying that like it is a relationship orientation that focuses on multiple loving relationships that you would be in.
Okay, so non-monogamous, we're saying multiple people, but with the consent, and everyone is aware of these partners.
Correct.
And when you get to the term polyamorous, it's just a step under non-monogamous. Not a step, but like
it's a subset, branch, like a branch.
Under. So
yes.
In this tree, this non-monogamous tree, one of the branches is polyamorous. But essentially non-monogamous as a whole is multiple people with everyone having consent and knowledge of all their people in this loving structure.
Correct.
Okay.
Good. Absolutely.
Next.
Yes. Good. Monogamous, on the other hand, refers to being in a relationship with only one partner at a time. So some people will sit there and say, if you are just someone that wants to date a bunch of people, why don't you just say that you're dating a bunch of people? But for the most part, we engage in what's considered serial monogamy, where you're dating one person at a time. And then when that relationship doesn't work, you move on to the next person. Whereas polyamory, or being someone who is ethically non-monogamous, you could actively be dating multiple people at one time and it be serious relationships that progress further.
So monogamous, we have you and Bob are in a relationship.
That is monogamous.
Bob,
meaning it's just the two of us in that relationship.
Just me and Bob.
Okay.
Bob decides, I don't like this relationship no more. I'm going to leave. And then at that point, I get into another relationship with Paul. But it's just people? Me and Paul.
It's just you and Paul.
Right.
Yes.
So that
would be considered serial monogamy.
Ethical non-monogamous, ENM. It's me, Bob, Paul, and Sarah.
Okay. It can be.
It can be. And Bob and Paul and Sarah are all aware of each other and that I'm trying to build a foundation with each of them.
Correct.
In their own way.
Yep.
But they're all aware that I'm dating other people or that they may be dating other people and I'm aware of that.
Correct. That is ethical non-monogamy.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Got it?
Got it.
And then polyamory would be like, an example of polyamory would be if you, Sarah, Bob, and Paul are all dating each other.
Okay.
Together.
Okay.
It'd be like a quad. You know,
Thruples.
so that's where like, yep, thruples exist.
All right, cool.
Yes. Okay.
So me, Bob, and Paul are dating each other.
Right. That would be considered like a throuple.
Mm-hmm. All right. And we're all consenting adults at this point.
Listen, all with consent. That's the biggest thing. And I think that's the argument that some people will say is like, well, if you want to cheat, you just want to say that you're ethical non-monogamous because you want to cheat. Well, no, because cheating also happens in these types of structural relationships. And it's because people are being unfaithful and not being truthful, honest, and what's the word I'm looking for? Upfront about what it is that they want, who it is that they're dating, and then not getting the consent of their other partners to then go ahead and date other people. So you can be cheating in either one of these relationships.
And then with cheating, there is that factor that you are not being, you're lying behind that person's back.
Right.
So if you're not like, hey, I'm going on a date with this person tomorrow because you pissed me off, and you just go on that date. And then, hey, what'd you do last night? Oh, I went to the library. You're hiding that fact.
Oh, you mean if you don't tell them that you're going on that date? That is considered cheating, yes. Or it could be considered cheating depending on who you talk to. But yes, for the most part, in this scenario, absolutely.
Right, but if you were in a non-monogamous relationship and I said, hey, I'm going to go on a date with Jack and we're going to have this conversation, well, who's Jack and what kind of structure are you looking to add to your branch with Jack? Or is this someone you're just going to get ice cream with and that's it? And that's the only relationship you're going to have with Jack. But we're sitting down having this conversation and we're being upfront and open about it. So you're not like, I didn't know this and feel betrayed or feel like you can't not trust, like you're not being able to trust that person that you're with.
Exactly, yes. And, especially being in a non-monogamous relationship, it takes a lot of communication that some monogamous relationships don't have, where you might have to like be upfront about and have to tackle like those uncomfortable feelings, which we'll get into a couple of them based off of like some things I learned in this class that I thought was an interesting, like thought-provoking concept.
So now that we got the kind of definitions of both umbrellas that we're going to talk about today, let's go into some of these takeaways that you learned from this class.
Takeaway number 1. So again, this class was 4 days long, and we talked about multiple
4 days long
things regarding non-monogamy, polyamory, and like different vocabulary and like understanding about it. So one of the things I found interesting was that a conversation around some actions are considered, quote, cheating based on an arbitrary set of rules that aren't specified or communicated. So for instance, like you said that I'm going on a date with Jack, right? And then, me and you are in a relationship and say that we're both practicing non-monogamy. For those of y'all that want us so bad, we're not. We're in a monogamous relationship, even though I identify as non-monogamous. But I digress. I just figured my honey bun would want me to say that. So anyway.
She's taking, guys.
Yeah, I am taking, so anyway. So say that you tell me, oh, I'm going on the date with Jack. And I'm like, okay, well, who's Jack? I've never heard you speak of this person before. And you tell me, oh, we're just going for ice cream and to hang out. It's someone I met at the library and I'm interested in getting to know them. Now, me understanding non-monogamy and understanding like what we are looking for in these different relationships would be like, bet, all right, enjoy. Tell Jack I said hey. But you do have other people in relationships that would turn around and be like, well, who the fuck is Jack? And why is it that only you are going? to go get ice cream with Jack.
Ice cream and not giving me ice cream.
Right. Like, why didn't he invite us as a couple?
It should be Jack and Jill. We're two.
Get off the freaking microphone. You're stupid.
I'm so
fucking
serious.
Jack and Jill and ice cream.
Crazy.
Anyway.
I'm dead
Anyway.
Dead ass. All right.
So yeah, so it's based off of like arbitrary like societal rules.
Right.
You know, stuff like that.
And then the other thing I think would be like, to even begin this whole, what kind of structure it is, you would have to have this conversation. Like, what are you looking for? So if you're not having that conversation first, then yeah, those are, if someone, say, take Nicole, for example, she's non-monogamous and I am monogamous. If I was to just automatically assume that, hey, in my mind, we are in a one-to-one relationship. There's no other outside partners. And if we've not had this conversation and we're only going off based off our Hinge profiles, Nicole's going to be operating on the, well, she knows I'm non-monogamous and these are the type of relationships I'm forming and friendships I have. So it was said in my profile, so I'm just assuming that she knows how I'm going to roll. Mm-hmm. And then on my profile, it says I'm monogamous, and I would be like, well, why would she think that it's okay to do these non-monogamous acts when my profile says I'm monogamous?
Exactly. So, and that's that the big thing that you said is assume, where you make an ass out of you and me. Because if you're not having these conversations, then there you are. Now we're thinking two different things, which then leads to problems later down the line. But then also it makes you think like, okay, what are some actions that you would consider cheating that I wouldn't consider cheating, and vice versa? Like, y'all know I'm a friendly person. I'll talk to anybody. And I know like some of my friends have said like, why, like you seem like you're flirting with that person. Do you like them? And I'm like, I literally just wanted to talk to them because they seem like cool people. But to me, I'm just talking to them. To an outsider, it looks like I'm cheating on, well, not cheating. Then I'm like, sorry. It looks like,
wait, what? It looks like what?
It looks like I'm flirting with them, right?
I had to do a double take real quick. Looks like a what?
What?
Say it again.
So yeah, I thought that was an interesting, because then that also leads to like, you know, when it comes to these conversations y'all having on these online dating profiles, like, you know, if we're in a relationship together, what is considered cheating to you? And what is not? Because you have the like where like, you know, you going out in the middle of the night, you texting people, like, blah blah blah.
Right.
You know, but then there's the other things that are like may seem low key, but may not.
Right. Because if you out here stroking everybody's arm, come on now.
Right.
Come on.
Stroking arms.
Some people make you think that's cheating.
Okay. Fair. So yes, I thought that was interesting.
And then being confident in yourself. Like, if you know that you're that type of person, I'd be like, oh, it's okay. I'll do a little tap here, a little touch here, and be conscious of not everyone is going to be on the same wavelength and frequency that you operate on. So you may be like, oh, it's harmless, and someone else is like, no, that's terrible. Mm-hmm. Don't be so naive to be thinking like, oh, well, I know I'm innocent, so you should just know I'm innocent. Not everyone thinks that way at all.
Right, exactly. And like in the last podcast, like I had again mentioned that I was ethically non-monogamous. So me and Jasmine had to have these conversations of, okay, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for us? How are we going to operate where you're still feeling seen as someone who is an E&M individual, but also now dating someone who is a monogamous individual? So when I say conversations, y'all, I mean conversations.
Many conversations.
But it forged a stronger relationship because she knows, like, I'm going to tell you, like, I'm going to be upfront and honest with you. I told you from the jump, this is how I feel. This is how I look at relationships. So I understand how you feel, how you look at relationships. So now when other factors are coming into play, i.e. when we go to sex down south, like, okay, let's talk about that. Like, what is to be expected or not expected?
Sex down south.
I'm so excited.
We're leading up to it.
We are leading up to it. We're going to talk about the whole thing. All right, so that was one thing. Another thing that I found interesting was this understanding that there is non-monogamous acts And then there's being non-monogamous. I know you gave me a look. Exactly. So when I say non-monogamous acts, i.e., you are a couple that, when y'all go on vacation, y'all happen to like hook up with a third person. You wouldn't necessarily consider yourself a swinger, but you are going outside of the relationship of just the two of you and having a threesome. That could be considered a non-monogamous act, technically by definition. Or if, in college you're experimenting, so you're kind of just going out here doing the things and experimenting, right? But you might have a steady partner that you are dating. You guys just aren't exclusive yet. So again, those would be considered non-monogamous.
So they're in
acts.
That dating phase, but they're not courting each other.
Good job. Yes.
You see how I did that?
Shout out. If you don't know what we're talking about, make sure you go see and listen to our other podcasts about courting and dating.
Versus dating podcast.
Yes. And lastly, those of us in the kink spaces, where you sit there and you have a primary partner and then you have partners that you engage in kink activities with, whether it's wax play, fire play, rope play, those would be considered non-monogamous acts because they're not solely with your one partner. And then being non-monogamous, for me specifically, because I do think that this is a subjective term. Yes, there is a definition of it, but what that means for people is different. So you want to ask people like, okay, well, what does that mean for you? So for me, that means that like I just look at relationships as their own unique entity. My relationship with you is going to be different than my relationship with, my sister, going to be different than my relationship with a friend versus a best friend versus an acquaintance versus a colleague. But I find all of those relationships to be important. I give my all for all of those relationships.
And she really does give her all to all of those relationships.
Literally.
We had this conversation a while back about how we view structures of relationships. And like take myself, for example, I may view relationships in more of a pyramid shape where Nicole may view them more on a lineage type of linear spectrum.
Yep.
Where everyone's kind of like, this person's equal to me, this person's important to me. Where I do like, okay, I got my girlfriend, got my family, got my friends, got my acquaintances, got my coworkers. Like, everyone flows in their natural way, whereas this person flows differently, and everyone flows the same for Nicole. So we had to have that conversation as well, just so we are on an understanding of like, okay, no, I'm not negating your feelings or your time or your effort, but also knowing that, hey, Jasmine, I just may need to spread some time here, spread some time here, spread some time here, and spread some time here.
Right, because each of those relationships are important to me in their own unique way.
But we know we ain't going to be spreading all this time out because we got a dissertation to finish.
Okay, very well. We understand. So again, it is very subjective. And then also thinking about like, it can be a choice or it can be an orientation. So you can say, I want to explore non-monogamy and what that looks like being in multiple relationships with the understanding that everyone that's in those relationships with me understands that others are there. Or it can be an orientation where it's like, no, this is who I am. So really think about that OBI model we kind of alluded to a couple episodes back, right? And looking at, orientation versus behavior versus identity and how they can intertwine, but they can be also different from each other.
Okay.
All right. Next one, looking at like social monogamy versus sexual monogamy. I found this interesting because like sexual monogamy meaning like you are only having sex with one person. And then social monogamy being like how you present to the rest of the world. So like kind of like what people value the most. And just kind of looking at like, okay, when I'm outside, like what's that look like? And then how does that pair up with how people view relationships Am I just with one person or am I with multiple people? Do you see it as just dating, or do you see it as, and it just being a behavior, or do you see it as like that's your identity and how you engage in different structures with others? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Okay.
What's
I hope it
another
makes sense for people. This is how, like I said, these are just takeaways that I got.
So what's another takeaway?
Okay. Next one. People want to follow a mononormative pathway, but that doesn't really work for everyone. So mononormativity is a big ass word to basically
Because when you wrote, I'm like, you know what? I ain't even going to try to say this word. I'm going to just let it rock. And whatever she say, I'm going to be like, yep, I knew it. I knew that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, so mononormativity is like there is one way to do relationships, which include this couple, and that's it. You know, and you know,
so that's like more of a traditional term, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
like societal.
Says there's a man and a woman. They get married. They procreate. Those kids find their own person. They procreate, and it keeps the cycle going.
Exactly.
Whereas something different can be like, no, we can have a man, a woman, another woman, and another man, and they cohabitate collectively. They procreate amongst each other.
Yep. And that's not just in relationships. Mononormativity is everywhere. So looking at like children's back to school forms, looking at like healthcare evaluations across the board, looking at peer reviewed research, looking at furniture like beds versus couches and what you would typically sleep on, looking at housing.
We sleep on the floor in this house.
Huh?
We sleep on the floor in this house.
Sometimes you need to be grounded. What to look at when you're talking about Valentine's Day, what that looks like. So it can, but the issue with mononormativity is that it's can be a very pervasive ideology where you are then looking at anything else as the quote other, or it's inferior, or it's abnormal, or it's not right, or it's against nature, or what have you. And it is constantly putting that mono piece, so that monogamous piece, that this one way is the only way that works, as being the superior, the more healthy, the more natural, the more mature.
I mean, I get that, and this is going to be my opinion on something like that. I feel as though many people preach the keep an open mind, and you know, everyone is entitled to their own opinion on things, but then we're like, oh no, this has to be this way.
Right.
So how can we be hypocritical and be like, no, have an open mind, and you know, this person's opinion matters just as much as your own opinion. But then as soon as we get to a conflict of something that's supposed to be quote unquote the norm, it's like, no, it's this way or the highway.
Right. And like even within like ethical non-monogamy relationships where like you're still trying to follow a mononormative pathway. So like, okay, if I'm dating multiple people, like am I dating multiple people the same way as someone else is dating multiple people? Like I see them once a week and we go do this thing, and then I see this other person. And then you have, you know, polyamorous relationships where, you know, there's the kitchen table style where everybody can sit down and have a meal together and they know about each other and everything's all good. Or, you know, you have the polyamorous relationships where, you know, I have my primary partner and then I have my other partners, and they don't have a say of what goes on in the house. Okay. And I'll get more into detail in terms of like just plain vocab later down in this episode. And just like understanding that having that mononormative mindset, even in a non-monogamous relationship, can be detrimental to the relationship, because you have to be able to figure out what works for you and then what works for the people that you are trying to be in a relationship with, whether it is one person or multiple people.
Got it. And if you are someone who can't multitask and is not organized, don't get into a relationship with multiple people, because when you got to make these dates and Bob wants to see you on Tuesday, then Paul wants to see you on Wednesday, and you just think that, all right, that's cool, and you mixing things up.
You calling Paul Bob and Bob Paul?
Right. Get it straight. What? That was unnecessarily funny. in my head when I first said it.
Well, now it's like corny, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Anyway. And then you have like people that are monogamish, right? So monogamish, where like you are in a relationship with someone and they are your one person, but you guys have parameters where like y'all can step out.
That's
whether
like
it's
that,
like
your hall pass.
Like a hall pass, or like if you're in the kink space, like, okay, I know that you, like, I'm not trained in this particular kink that you want to try, so I'm okay if you kind of check that out. But like maybe I want to be there, or maybe I don't want to be there. So some people might call that as being monogamish.
Right.
I feel like dabble in and out kind of thing.
Kind of have a hall pass. I got a hall pass, but I don't think I'm ever going to be able to. All right. Don't give me that look.
Kaylani don't want you, baby. Kaylani don't want you. I'm sorry.
Let me put my hall pass out there.
All right. Well, come on, you know what?
Chill.
I'll let you. If she come to this door, she's yours.
Kaylani,
for 24 hours.
If you are ever in New Jersey, come to this area and knock on that door. She just said it's okay. And I'm going to slide this episode in your DMs too.
Anyway. Not you going to slide it into her DMs. Anywho. So yeah, I found that to be just like an interesting thing.
I feel like when you're talking about like non-monogamish, I feel like that's where most people are in their life, because they're not necessarily wanting to say they want to be tied down to one person, but they're also not as experienced to say, okay, I'm in a relationship with multiple people at the same time. It's like, hey, I have Nicole, but like, am I really ready to only have Nicole?
Oh, you mean when you're like exploring the dating world?
Yeah. I mean, not even just exploring the dating world. There's people in relationships who's also like, do I really want this one person? Is there something I'm missing somewhere else that I'm limiting myself to only this one person?
Do people sometimes have that thought process? Yes. I would think so.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like, that's the majority though.
You'd be surprised.
I mean, it might be the majority in the people that you talk to, but I don't think that's the majority. I know
a lot of non-monogamous people. My friends are solid.
No, I meant like, I know a lot of friends that like when they found out that I was non-monogamous, they flat out was like, that's interesting. I could never do that. Like, I am only dating one person and this is my person and that is it. I cannot see myself trying to date someone else. I cannot see myself allowing them to try to date someone else.
It's a lot. It's a lot that goes into it.
It is. You need calendars and you have to also, it's okay to, be like, you know what? I want to see where this goes and it just not be for you. So that, taking that into consideration. And that like goes right into the next piece of information that I found was that like coming out as non-monogamous can be just as challenging as coming out as being gay or a lesbian or bisexual or trans or anything like that. Like it can be just as challenging, not to say that any one is more challenging than the other, but that the overall arching concept of, quote, coming out is challenging because you don't know what you could potentially lose, whether it's friends, whether it's family, whether it's support, whether it's a job. You don't know what you can lose, but you also don't know what you can gain. And you're constantly battling back and forth.
Because you're sitting there basically explaining to other people that this is my opinion and this is my preference, which is not the norm. So you have to explain that to somebody, and someone who most people have that this is the norm, this is how it should be mindset. So to have to explain that to someone who grew up and only thinking this is the normal, this is what's going to happen, and then you have someone else who's like, no, well, I know it's the norm, but I actually like X, Y, and Z. And they're just like confused and they're like, why?
Yeah, and it can set you up for having hurt feelings, truthfully, or for some people, setting you up for harm, trauma of some kind. So just like paying attention to that I didn't, because I would think, as someone who, I love relationships. I probably should have been a couples and sex therapist, to be honest, because I love relationships. I love how they work. I love how people like think in relationships and outside of relationships. So to think about this like need to come out as non-monogamous or not needing to come out as non-monogamous and making that choice and having to make that choice on a daily is interesting to me. So
Okay, so let's go right into this next
yes. Okay.
takeaway, because I feel like I like this the best.
Okay. So
not saying that they aren't great.
I was about to say, wow, you just
but I do
whole episode sucks, huh?
I do like this the best.
See.
Dang.
Yes, yeah. Jealousy is a big conversation. We had like a whole class on jealousy specifically because one of the quotes I'm going to read to you is by Maya Angelou, and I love Maya Angelou. She's phenomenal. And the quote she says is, "Jealousy is like salt in food. A little can enhance the flavor, but too much can spoil the pleasure. And under certain circumstances can be life-threatening," right? And so there's this understanding, there's this need to understand the difference between if you're feeling jealousy versus envy versus possessiveness. And that's what she's talking about. Jealousy is, in our society, we always see as it being like a negative thing or like over glorifying it. Like, oh no, I couldn't do that. I would be so jealous, blah, 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 blah. What are you jealous about? So jealousy is not wanting to lose what you already have. So you're jealous that time is something that you might be losing with this person. Affection is something you might be losing with this person. Pleasure is something you might be losing with this person. And that is healthy. You want a little bit of jealousy in a relationship, in my opinion. Right. Because having a little bit, it's like, yeah, you actually, like, you want this to work. Okay. But you don't want that jealousy to then overtake what you do have. You don't want that jealousy to then consume you, and then it turns into envy, wanting something that you don't have.
Right. So, I mean, I think that with jealousy, I think that, or not the jealousy, the part of it where you're saying that you could potentially lose something that you already have, it comes from your partner being secure with themselves and saying, I'm also bringing something to the table where if my partner is to step out or something like that, they're going to lose on their end as well. So like, I'm secure enough to know that you may, establish whatever relationship, but like, I bring something to the table that you want to. So if you decide that you want to step out, you're going to lose out on something, not just me losing out on something. So I don't think there's a jealousy part on it where we're both losing out.
Stepping out in terms of like cheating?
Yeah.
Yes. But when it comes to like being non-monogamous and saying like, hey, like we have an established relationship. I met this person and I want to get to know them a little bit better. There might be a little bit of jealousy there. And that jealousy might be because you are not sure what about that other person makes you interested in them. Right? So, like, just paying attention to that and, like, how that, like, comes into.
And I think that's where you're, like, well, some people are, like, well, if that person has this that you have, that necessarily means that I'm lacking that in some way.
Exactly. And I think that's something that even me and you like talked about in the beginning, like, okay, well, what makes you feel like you want to explore more other relationships? And it's not because I think that you're lacking in anything. It's that I enjoy what other people, like the values that other people bring, into life or into my life. And so I want to explore that more. Again, like I said, envy being wanting something that you don't already have, and then possessiveness, so having that like controlling entitlement ownership, wanting to control and wanting to not have any other influences over that person or thing. So that's where Maya Angelou is saying, jealousy being a little can enhance the flavor, but then you have the envy, too much can spoil the pleasure, and then possessiveness, under certain circumstances can be life-threatening, where you're sitting there and you're saying, no, you can't have any other relationships but me. And that's where it's problematic, right? Because then we're talking about, potentially leading into like intimate partner violence, which was a whole other segment of this class. But that is something that we'll definitely be leaving for a part 2, because looking at the time now, we're just going in.
This
right
episode
now.
started going in. Yeah, it started getting more and more detailed.
But it's because it's something that like I do identify as, and also it's an interesting conversation to have with people and to like understand their own thoughts and feelings and views about it. And then, like I said, some of these takeaways, I was like, now that is interesting, especially like I said, this jealousy quote. I really I liked it, and I thought that it was something to take into consideration when talking about relationships in general and what society deems as appropriate and not appropriate.
Right. And then even with just the non-monogamous and monogamous, other aspects of this that plays into it, like social media. So those being problematic as well is important to dive into, and understanding how that shapes your relationship structure. You may not think like it's a problem, but something as simple as like, you never post me on your social media. That's perceiving as someone like you're hiding me.
Right. Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Or you like 30 other girls' pictures. Like, what do they have that I don't?
Yep.
And that plays into someone's insecurities, or they're like, is my body not pressure the way you like it? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that can play into how your relationship structure pans out. So we got some other key takeaways that we are going to dive into. So we're actually going to make a part 2 for next week. So next week you're going to get part 2 of this monogamous, non-monogamous conversation,
which will likely not have the guest. Sorry,
right?
Because there's still other takeaways.
We ain't going to have a guest that fast, but we want to get all of this information out to you as soon as possible, and then maybe revisit this topic, or just have a guest who wants to come and talk about something else that they like and enjoy, or their view on non-monogamous and monogamy relationships.
I would love to get a guest that's maybe like a couples and sex therapist that like works with people who identify as polyamorous, and like talking about like what are some issues that you have helped couples get through, and like those kinds of things. I think that'd be really cool.
I want to guess for a lot of topics, actually. I have a couple topics that I was like, I would want to ask this person if they would come and talk on our podcast, or I want this person to talk about this topic. And I know there's also been people who reached out who said they wanted to speak. So sooner than later, start diving into these. Let's bring this conversation with others. Me and Nicole being able to talk to others, because I like to rack people's brain. And if you're a professional in this field, or not even a professional, but you are an expert in this field, I want to know a lot of information.
Or even if it's just something like, oh, I have experience. Remember, this podcast is about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. So,
right, and
no better way to do that than to be talking to
other
the
people.
regular degulars.
All right, so anyway, thank you guys for coming on this journey where we did talk a little bit about some great topics, and we have more coming. So next week we'll finish this topic up, and we'll finish this conversation, because it's very important that you guys understand the difference. So when you start dating and looking at profiles, you're like, Jasmine told me a monogamous is with me and Paul, and then once me and Paul done, it's gonna be me and Bob.
Right. Yes.
And Nicole said, it's me, Paul, Bob, and Sarah, all of us together consensually.
Exactly.
So take a look, start looking at these things, have these conversations. And if you're in a relationship already and you're like, maybe I want to explore this, have this conversation with the partner that you currently have. They may be wanting to explore things too.
Yes. And what are we always harping on these
and every
podcasts
conversation that we've had, we said
communication is key.
Look at that. We even said that together.
Yeah, because we didn't just count down. Get off.
What y'all see is my hands. 3, 2. Communication is key.
Anyway,
catch y'all next week.
Y'all, it's late. We tired, so
catch y'all next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, part 2 of the non-monogamous conversation that we're having.
Absolutely.
Have a good night. Have your glass of wine and enjoy.
Happy birthday, Jasmine.
Thank you.